Shalom Ubracha, dear friends. Welcome to Jasmine's Hot Topics. I am excited about our today's guests. We have two amazing rabbis here. One rabbi is Rabbi Michael Green. He's a very special rabbi, a very outspoken rabbi. Everybody who is his friend on Facebook knows how outspoken he is and touches on subjects that a lot of people may find or say that they are more conspiracy, but I believe Rabbi Green is speaking a lot of truth. And we have Rabbi Mordechai Darvish, and he teaches a lot of Torah, and he's also a very outspoken rabbi and tells a lot of truth. I would say we all belong to the truther community. Welcome, everybody. Shalom Ubracha.
Okay.
So let's start with Rabbi Michael Green. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and tell us a little bit about your background and how this all came about? Like, how did you start becoming so outspoken?
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with you and with Rav Mordechai, whom I know from the past as well. My name is Michael, by the way, but it's fine. Michael is in English. Woke up only recently to what you call truther, the truther movement. For me, it was in 2019 when they began to eliminate religious exemption to vaccination in different states, most significantly in New York State and in California, and a few other states. And what I learned what I understood at that time was that the many thousands of Jewish children were being banned from Talmud Torah, from Jewish institutions that are supposed to be teaching Torah to children, all throughout New York State and California. And then I also was dismayed to learn that this is also going on in just about many other states here in the United States, in many other institutions. In Maryland and in Illinois and in Florida, that most of the Jewish institutions are banning Jewish children from attending school, and they were rejecting religious exemption to vaccination. So when this only affected me for one of my children at that time was attending a yeshiva he was 15 years old. He was attending a yeshiva for high school age boys in Queens, and it was a Chabad institution. The rabbi called me and informed me a week before the new school year that my son would not be permitted to attend yeshiva that he had attended for the past 2 years until unless he was fully vaccinated according to New York State law and the mandated schedule. I asked him, does that just curious? Would that also include vaccines like Gardasil and hepatitis B, vaccines that no Orthodox rabbi ever required or even allowed? He told me, yes, all of them. I told him, which Rav? Please tell me the name of the Rav who approved of this draconian Orwellian gzeira, decree on Jewish children. He gave me the name of the Rav of Crown Heights. I contacted him immediately, and he lied, and he told me that he never approved of such a thing. I called the principal back. Principal said, yes, he did approve of it. I then afterwards heard from numerous other administrators that he told them behind closed doors that they are allowed to enforce all of the state's decrees, all the state's mandates, every single vaccine. And then I began for me, this really riveted me. This really disturbed me. As you may have mentioned, I'm a Chabad. I have a Chabad education. My great grandfather and great grandfather were Chabad Hasidim, and I've always been a very staunch follower and student of the Rebbe's teachings. And I found this to be very, very disturbing that Rabbanim were allowing these draconian measures without any the public was completely unaware of this. I began to write letters. I wrote a letter to this rabbi, and I began to write letters to rabbis all throughout the world, hundreds and hundreds of letters. I had a couple assistants helping me. I composed letters to Rabbanim all over the world, including in Eretz Israel, asking who supports this, who is supporting these draconian measures, which are shalok halacha. It's a violation of Torah law.
Right.
According to all opinions, there's not even a single authentic opinion in halacha in Jewish law
Right.
that would allow for tolerate such a thing. And I discovered that this is not only happening in the Chabad world. I learned that this is happening in all other circles, nearly. And the word and at that time and then when COVID began shortly afterwards, uh, I realized that the Jewish world, and not just I'm not only outspoken opposed to I'm not only opposed to the current Chabad leadership in current Chabad institutions. I'm opposed to the entire Jewish organized Orthodox Jewish world. Um, I believe that the Jewish world has become subverted by a very sinister and insidious disease, which I call, I don't know if this is a real word, but the word I'd like to use is institutionalism. That
Right.
similar to what's happening in the greater world. You mentioned Trump, but similar to what's happening in the world, in the United States, for example, and in Israel, we have really the governments we have is really a form of fascism. I know that people get scared when we use that word, but fascism really is what they call corporatism. So what I mean by that, for example, is that the government, the state, it's not constitutional for them to force masks on people or to force mandates and to force whatever.
Yes.
What they do is they allow the tolerate the corporations to enforce them. So it wasn't the governor of New York or the governor of Massachusetts or the governor of Florida that was forcing people to wear masks. It was the Walmart. It was the Trader Joe's. It was the Costco. Every Starbucks. They were the ones enforcing. And that was what happened in Nazi Germany. It was the same thing. The corporations were enforcing. So what we find what happened in recent years is the entire system has been co-opted or subverted, compromised by all the institutions are now walking in lockstep with a draconian Orwellian. I'm using the word an Orwellian agenda. I
Right.
don't know if that's a good introduction.
Yes, yes, very good. And so, what is it about you specifically? Like, I would like to know, and I'm sure, like a lot of people who follow you, we would like to know what is it about you? Where do you take the bravery from to be so outspoken? What is it like? Is it your upbringing? Who instilled those values in you to not be a follower of the masses, but to go against the stream and speak out?
That's a good question. Well, I have I was first inspired. My grandmother is from Tbilisi, from Georgia. I don't know if the European Georgia or the Georgia in
Yes.
you know what I mean, in the Kafkaz area. Um, and she taught me to never allow government to tell me what's essential and what's not. She survived the Soviet Union and the Tsarist pogroms,
Right.
and
So you
she
learn
and
from history. You learn
yeah, I
from
have history. Yeah, I have history, but also I personally am Choser B'Tshuva, or I'm trying to be every day of my life. And even though my family history in Chabad goes way back, but I came to it as a teenager. Began to attend the Chabad yeshiva. My parents didn't give me an Orthodox upbringing, not me nor my brother. So we came to it later in high school, and so I would say that I'm more of I chose Jewish observance. I wasn't raised that way. So my relationship with my
but
whole
they
approach to the Torah is because I chose this for myself, and I didn't. It wasn't dictated to me, and I wasn't conditioned to grow up a certain
yeah.
way. And I have always been guided by the Rebbe's teachings, and I felt and I was inspired by the what I mean the Rebbe means Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He always someone who inspired me because he was a person who dared to think independently, and and that's something which I always sought to emulate. What really disturbed me was when I saw many or most of his followers capitulate and bow down to modern day Marxism, which
Right.
was so I feel like and just that we spoke before I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to Chabad. I feel like I am Chabad. If there's any one person who's still standing who represents what Chabad really means, I feel that's me, maybe and a few others. Um, so I feel that what's happened nowadays in the Chabad movement is a very grave departure from what
Right.
the teachings of the tzaddikim and the admurim of the past, of the
Yeah.
Hasidic movement as a whole and of Yahadut as a whole.
Thank you. Rabbi Mordechai, I want to address you now. You are an Orthodox rabbi. You're not affiliated with Chabad or any other stream. Is that correct?
Right.
And like, why are you so outspoken? How did it start for you?
Well, let's say I'm not affiliated in terms of like there's no yoke on my neck telling me what I have to or what I don't have to do, except for Jewish law, Jewish halacha. That's for sure. I am in the Orthodox. If you had to categorize it, right? um, how I so outspoken? I think Rav Michal hit on it that we came into observance from our own accord, and it wasn't forced upon us, and we did. I mean, at least for me, I don't have so much of a need to fit in.
Right.
I want to do what's right. Because I left my old world. The secular world is all about fitting in. If you want to make it, if you want to do it, it's all about like the whims of society. You got to roll with it. And I left that. So I left it for what exactly? I left it for truth,
For the truth.
right? For truth and the right way to do stuff. And we learn from the truth, from, obviously from our books and also from the people around us. So and the people around us, they tell us to go to the books, right? They tell us to learn the Talmud, to learn the Torah, the Midrashim, the ways of the tzaddikim of the past, right? The whole goal is to be as holy as possible. So, that was the original coming into it. So when I came into it, that was my goal. My goal was to be the best, to be like the tzaddikim.
So both of you have something in common. You're both Balei Tshuvas. You come from a not religious background. You chose to be observant.
Right.
But what was instilled maybe prior to becoming religious in both of you is probably the desire to follow the truth, to always go after the truth, whatever it may be, and not have a need to fit in, right?
Yeah.
To not be a follower, not be a sheep.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Like when I was secular, I was trying to fit in. I mean, like not to fit in all the way, but like, trying to dress like everyone, look like, style your hair like everybody and all that stuff. Yeah, for sure. But there was always, ever since I was little, like something instilled in me, like you got to do the right thing. Like I think Green spoke about like his grandma, like said don't give into like political pressure or governments and all that stuff. I had that in me. Like when I saw injustice, I would curse a teacher when I saw her doing something like wrong to a student. Like I didn't care for the authority. I cared for what was the right thing. And it was something instinctual, like because then you fall into well, who says what's right and yada yada.
So I want to ask you a challenging question, okay?
Yeah.
There are a lot of rabbis who say if the Gadol Hador says to do XYZ, we have to follow XYZ without using our own brains. Where in the Torah can we find sources that tell us, no, we don't have to follow Gadol Hador, like, shall I say a name? Let's say, no, I don't want to say a name, but let's say, a head rabbi, a big rabbi, let's say the Sephardic head rabbi, okay, in Israel. If he says, everybody run and get your vaccine, Chova, are we obligated to per Torah? Where do we find in the Torah that we can say no to a rabbi?
Okay, Rabbi Green, let me speak first. I'm very curious to see what you say. Very, very curious. So I want to make like a general statement. The people who are Gedolei Hador nowadays, like that are let's say the most scholarly, knowledgeable of our times, I have no connection with them personally. I can't.
Do you recognize them as Gadol Hador?
I only recognize them because somebody told me. I didn't test them with their knowledge and with their belief, and I have no connection with them. I don't know who these people are. Like I know who they are by name because everybody says their name, and points to them. And I could read their books as well. but I don't have any dialogue with them. I can't ask them questions. I can't say, is there an exception to this? Is this like a blanket rule or anything like that? That's one thing. So, in which case, why would I give that person authority over me? We don't live in a place where back in the day, everybody lived in Israel and they had to listen to the Sanhedrin because the Sanhedrin were the rabbis for the generation, right? We don't. We're scattered all over the world, right? We have localized rabbis, localized people to help us navigate through spirituality and physicality, and that's it. So when someone says, "Hey, so and so, he's the greatest scholar in the world," you have to listen to him. I haven't seen anything in the Torah and or in the code of law that says that I am obligated to listen to him.
Okay, Rabbi Green, what's your opinion on that?
Yes, I agree. Well, as Rabbi Mordechai just said, there's no authority nowadays. There's no, even the smicha is not real. Smicha is not, even the ordination is not real. It's kind of arbitrary, as there is no Sanhedrin for centuries, many centuries, and like the Rambam writes, it's each person picks the Rav in the community that he lives, picks his Rav Moreh Hora'ah, the Rav that he consults with. And even that Rav, the person that you consult with, if there's possibility for a Rav to make a mistake, or a Chacham, a person who, and if the person makes a mistake and you're aware of the mistake, you have to correct the Rav. Many times the Rav is not, first of all, and I say this also, I'd say that I'm in a unique position to be able to say this only because of, I know many Rabbanim personally, and I spent many years of my life reading Sheilot Teshuvot, responsa from famous rabbis of previous generations, and Rabbanim are not malachim. They're not nevi'im. It's possible for a Rav to make a mistake, and it happens frequently. And when it does happen, we are required to teach the Rav. And sometimes what I want to make a little distinction is I don't want to sound like I'm challenging authority of Torah scholarship. I'm not challenging the judgment. I'm not challenging the judgment of an accomplished Torah scholar who is a recognized authority, who has shimush and has smichat rabbanut and whatever it is, right? I'm not challenging his judgment. I'm challenging his knowledge, his awareness of reality. So, for example, and there's many precedents. For example, arguably the greatest scholar of the generation, of the past generation, was one of them was Rav Moshe Feinstein, right? He was the Posek Hador, the Gadol Hador, but and he was a recognized expert on halacha that most of the rabbanim of nowadays rely on his many of his piskei din. Landmark piskei din. Just to give an example, if it wouldn't be for the Rav Moshe Feinstein, his piskei din, most of Klal Yisrael nowadays would be mamzerim. So the very fact that so he's an unprecedented Torah scholar of the highest caliber, and most Torah scholars of the previous generation acknowledge that, if not all of them. However, he made mistakes. As in one example, he made a mistake. He allowed travel on the Tzim. On the ship on the cruise line Sim back in, I don't know what, back in the 50s or 60s, a long time ago, and he made a mistake because he didn't understand. He wasn't an engineer. He didn't understand the handasa. He didn't understand how the machinery worked.
Right.
And he was told something by the Israeli engineers that was misinformation, or was lacking context, or it was inaccurate. So he came out with his psak din, instructing people, giving people a permission to travel, including travel over Shabbat on this line, this Tzim, and it was a mistake. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said when he saw the psak din, he said Ein ze psak din al pi klalei Torah. It's not acceptable. It has no authority, not because Rabbi Feinstein is lacking in scholarship, or exercising judgment, but because he's unaware of the reality. He's unaware of the realities of what he's. So even the rabbanim of the highest caliber. Now, I want to make a distinction also that most rabbanim nowadays are not of the highest caliber. Most rabbanim nowadays are I don't want to say in a negative, like almost like politicians, or like they're part of the institutions. It means they have to keep their institutions financially viable. So, right. And their community, for example, so they're also like, I don't know, again, I don't want to insult anyone, insult your viewers. I was once asked to join another podcast sometime back, and I shared my views on Zionism, and the people were furious at me, and they never asked me back again after that. Because I don't know how much I'll say over here, which is anti-establishment. Although
we want you to speak your mind fully, 100%, and you'll be surprised how much we'll agree.
Okay, good. So what I wanted to say was that most rabbanim nowadays are a part of institutions, and they're
are they willfully part of the institution, or willfully blind, or they just want
to like for example, I don't know how familiar you are with the world of Chabad, but in the Chabad world you have like what they call them Rabbanei Anash. You heard that expression? Anash stands for, in Hebrew, it's an acronym. It's a Roshei Tevot. It stands for Anshe Shlomeinu, the men of our fellowship. So you would say Anash. So Rabbanei Anash. If you look online, there's this powerful rabbinic institution in Israel of what they call Rabbanei Anash, and these are the halachic authorities, let's say, of most of the Chabad world. Outside in Chutz La'aretz we have also rabbanim, but they're not as organized. Maybe there's the Bet Din of Crown Heights, but which doesn't not. So Yid is Rabbanei Anash. It's like this monolithic rabbinical body in Israel. Almost all of them are paid government employees. They're paid government employees. We call them. There's an expression we call them rabbanim mitam. You heard this expression before? It's a Hebrew expression.
I'm actually surprised by that. So you're saying they're on payroll by the government?
Yeah, they're payroll. Anyone who's a part of the rabbanut, he's on a payroll. He's paid by the government. So now, if he's paid by the government
in Israel, you mean in Israel or also Lechutz?
In Israel, no, in Israel. No, I'm not. I'm talking about. I gave an example of Rabbi Anash. I'll talk about others in a moment. They're also on the payroll in a different way, not directly. But what I mean by when I talk about Israel, the rabbanim in Israel, most of the rabbanim in Israel are on the government payroll. So when they came out, this rabbinic body, Rabbanei Anash, they came out with a psak din, or a gilui da'at, which is another way of enforcing something without calling it a psak din, without calling it. And they said a gilui da'at that everyone has to take the COVID vaccine, right? And all the rabbanim who signed it, I don't remember, 30, 20 rabbanim, almost all of them were members of the rabbanut. This one was the Rav. This one was the Rabbanut of Hulon. This was the Rabbanut of Kriyat Malachi. This one was from Eilat. This one from. So all of these people, they're all of these rabbis, all of these rabbanim who they claim to be, ostensibly they're teaching us what the objective law of the Torah is, that what we should do. Those who follow their teachings, their instructions, they're telling us to observe a government policy, and they are paid government employees. So how could we be asking them a question? It's like imagine there's no this is what we call nigiyot. It's called nigiyot. They're compromised. They're not compromised.
It's ethically wrong, because we're supposed to hear from them Torah and Torah-based opinions, and they are enforcing government policies on us that we didn't ask for.
Well, they claim that it's their halachic opinion as halachic authorities, but what they're not mentioning is that they are the word nigiyot. Rav Mordechai, you could help me. What's the word for that? They're
biased.
Yeah, they're biased, and they have they're
tarnished.
What's that?
Maybe tarnished.
No. There's an ulterior because look. In other words, if I'm asked to give a psak din about something, what's the word?
Compromise, maybe. Compromise.
Yeah, because when I'm asked to give a psak din about someone who I'm related to, so I have to say no. I have to recuse myself. I have to say this is a person. Or for example, if I'm asked to give to adjudicate on a matter which involves the person who pays my salary, and so I can't. No, I can't. I'm not
impartial.
Not impartial. I'm partial. So, and even if I say that, and that's why it says shochad ya'aver einei chachamim. That means that bribery blinds the eyes of the wise, right? Bisalef divrei tzadikim. Bisalef divrei tzadikim. It's interesting. You know what Rashi says there? Rashi says when it comes to where does it say in Exodus? We're going to have it in a couple of weeks. We're going to read about it in the Torah. The Torah says the bribery blinds the eyes of the wise.
Right.
And distorts. What's the word? Distort.
Bisalef.
So Rashi says what does it mean? Rashi says, what does it mean? Divrei tzadikim, dvarim hamutstakim. That means it falsifies divrei tzedek, words that should have been words of justice. So the question is, why does he write that? Why doesn't he just say divrei tzadikim? But it distorts the words.
Because we see the issues in health with the vaccines, but we also see it with the food, the kosher food, where we get our kosher stamp on, should never be called kosher. How can pure chemicals that are hurting our bodies be called stamped as kosher for our bodies when they're hurting us? So again, it's the same issue. It comes back to the same.
It's complicated. That I would say when it comes to that, again, you know what I wanted to mention Chutz La'aretz in a moment. That's a little bit different, but it's a similar idea. What I was just trying to say was that when there's financial incentive, not just financial incentive, but financial dependency. So this Rav of Kiryat Malachia, this Rav of whoever, the senior Chabad Rav of Rabbanei Anash, he says you have to go take this vaccine. You have to, he's pushing a government policy, and he's a government employee, so he needs to recuse himself, and he has to say, I'm unfit to give any ruling on this topic that relates to government policy. Now, when it comes to the United States, and you mentioned kashrut, when it comes to the United States or other countries, so there's also negio, there's also bias and partiality, and the reason for that is a little different. So they're not being paid by the government directly, but they're being paid by institutions or by communities who are relying on government, heavily relying on government subsidies and government subsidies and corporate subsidies. So, for example, I'm not as familiar with other communities, but I know this exists everywhere. Every community has this dynamic in one way or the other. I just talked to someone in the Bukharian community actually last night in Queens. In wherever it's called Forest Hills, they have the same dynamic that the institutions, the educational institutions, are requiring state funding. They're not viable without state funding. So therefore, they have to go in lockstep with government, and the Rabbanim understand that. So their Rabbanim, their rabbinical authorities understand that they have to be in lockstep with government, and therefore the Rabbanim are going to bend over backwards to try to justify that, and many times they'll be doing it behind closed doors, and we don't even know, and the schools will go and endorse policies. When it comes to kashrut, it's financial and corporate. Again, this is all corporatism, so that's why we found just now the OU.
Rabbi Mordechai, I wanted to ask you something. When it comes to doctors, okay, it was always the stance of all the rabbis, you do what if we go to our rabbi, say, shall I do this surgery? No, I'm booked for. 1 week I'm booked to do the surgery. The doctor says it's a life-saving surgery, but I have, I have doubts. I'm afraid. Should I do this surgery? And the stance was always the standard was always, yes, you listen to your doctor. Is it safe to say in our days and times that we live in to always listen to your doctor? Should a rabbi tell you, listen to your doctor?
Okay, so I want to hit on what Rabbi Green said from a personal story. So I used to learn under the rabbi, the head rabbi of Israel right now, Rav David Yosef. And he told us a story about his father, Rav Ovadia Yosef. And he said about him that there was one time where it was an issue with diapers. He didn't get into the specifics, but he learned with a man, and the two came to his father to issue a ruling, and the man lied to his father. So he took the man aside and he said, "Why'd you lie to him? You know this isn't the case." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Your father's a tzaddik. God wouldn't put the wrong words in his mouth." And he basically screamed at him. He's like, "Are you insane? Where did you get such a thought like that?" He said, "We have a whole Masechet called Masechet Orayot, explaining to us what we do when the rabbis make a mistake. Okay, you can't feed them the wrong information and expect the right output. It's impossible. Okay, and so going on that logic, I know for a fact that they were fed the wrong information with the whole COVID fiasco. Now, going on to what you're asking is, should you ask a rabbi, to have a surgery or not have a surgery, to things on medicine? We know today that the whole medicine industry has been compromised. right? It's been compromised through lobbying, through pharmaceutical companies, through whatever it is. Everybody's got an idea. Everybody's biased because of some kind of financial benefit that they're going to receive, right? And even the most tamim, the most innocent doctor doesn't really know the truth unless they discover it. Okay, because they're fed so much misinformation about things, about treatment of disease, about causes of disease, about proper nutrition to get there, that they themselves don't have the right information unless they're like part of the truthers, the people who seek it out. I mean, I used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep. I used to teach doctors the efficacy of the drug that we were asking them to prescribe. Why would a person who doesn't have any medical training be teaching a doctor?
It's almost like you were the drug dealer teaching the
No,
the
don't get me
supplier
wrong.
the drug dealer.
There were the exceptional doctors who knew everything before I presented it to them. But there were just what we call them arts and doctors. Like doctors are just run of the mill doctors who had no clue. I was actually giving them presentations on medicine and how the drug works and its half-life and everything like that. So, I don't take what they say, I take it with a grain of sand. So I say right now, like, doctors in the past used to have information that the public didn't have access to. So they were the authority, and you went to them almost blind and say, help me, doc,
Right.
But nowadays you can Google anything that's out there, right? And everything is out there. The symptoms, the treatments, the causes, everything is Googleable. And since it's Googleable, these doctors don't have that much of an advantage over you because they don't try the medicine themselves on themselves, right? They're going from the information that they got. And I've been privy to so many doctors that have tried the trial and error method. You know, trial and error?
Right.
You try this, oh, it doesn't work, try this. It doesn't work, I try that. It doesn't work, try that. And so they're not the arbiters of truth. So they don't know the truth. Now you're going to come to an halachic authority, a person who knows. For me, Torah is a way to connect to God, right? You have 613 commandments, and you have various, maybe 15,000 halachas on how to keep those commandments. That's all the rabbi is going to be knowledgeable in. Like, and that's what I would ask him in. I wouldn't ask him things that he's not an expert on.
Right.
Right? It would just be silly to. And there's nothing in the Torah that says to. You know what I mean? So they can't come and say, hey, look at the Torah, look at here. It says to go to your local rabbi or to go to the great rabbi of the generation and ask him what I should do for my health.
Right.
There's no such thing. Despite what the masses are doing. I was in Israel and my journey took me there, and there's this thing of go to the rabbi and ask them, and they have some crazy mystical power to see what you should do, and that will have an effect on you. Now, it's all great and fine. You hear stories left and right of successes, but you don't hear the stories of the failures.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a story of the failure. I'm a story that something happened to my daughter, and the rabbi said, "Oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything will be great," and everything, and it wasn't. And they said to listen to the doctors, and the doctors were absolutely wrong.
Right.
And it was discovered by other doctors that the original doctors were wrong. So I know firsthand not to listen to people who have no idea about medicine. Now, circling back to what originally happened, it is 100% a fact that these rabbis who told people to get the vaccines, told them to get, go along with the treatments and the 6 feet of distancing and don't go to shul and all that stuff, were fed 100% wrong misinformation. Rabbi Green and I were in Florida. We had Dr. Gold tell us total lies, right, that were spewed to them. And based on that, now we have a precedent. Right, you listen to the experts. Listen to the doctor. If it's a life and death matter, when you give lashes in the Torah, the doctor checks them out. How many lashes could he take before he would pass away? So you give him less than that, so you don't want to kill the person. Right? There is some kind of precedent to listen to doctors, but not when you know blatantly that they're being fed misinformation.
Right. So, Rabbi Green, would you say that there's something like a Makata Hoshech, like people like back in Egypt, right? When 80% of the people did not want to follow Moshe Rabbeinu out of Egypt. They stayed back in Egypt and they died, and they were affected by all the plagues and they died. Okay. So is the same happening today? The majority of us hit by Makata Hoshech, by blindness, they can't see. Or is this a choice? Is this a bchira chofshit? What do you think?
There's a lot to comment on to what Rav Mordechai said, but he said exactly, he hit it right on the head. Regarding Makat HaChoshech, I say just the opposite. I believe that we're in the final moments of Galut, of the exile, and at the end of time, at the end of Galut Mitzrayim, it was L'chol Bnei Yisrael Haya Or B'Moshvotam. That means that in for all the children of Israel, there was light in their dwelling places. I believe that we're not living in the plague of darkness. We're living in times that we have access to light, but we have to make the choice to choose light and not darkness.
Right.
And if those for willfully sitting in the dark, so then they're bringing the makat choshech upon themselves. As far as I believe that we are going through the birth pangs of Mashiach, of Galut, of Geula, transitioning to Geula, and I believe that the main, I mentioned this earlier, I mentioned the idea of institutionalism. I believe that the main problem we're dealing with here is that in order to be redeemed as a people, we have to be redeemed as an individual. Like it says in Isaiah, like it says in the prophets, in Tanakh, in Navi, it says, V'atem teluku la'achad echad b'nei Yisrael. That means that, it says, Kahal gadol yashuvu heina, right? A great multitude, a great community returns, but also that God, V'shav Hashem lokecha shvutcha, Hashem returns with each individual. What's happening now is the mistake. I don't want to say mistake. Again, like Rav Mordechai said, there was the Rabbanim make mistakes. I would like, I know what I want. I just wanted to add to what Rav Mordechai said, that just like modern day doctors, the vast majority of them are not experts in refuah concerning what you're consulting them about. They're just touting a policy. They're just endorsing a certain policy that they don't have no experience on at all. And all of the doctors who endorsed the COVID vaccine, for example, they had no expertise in toxicology and vaccine safety. They had no idea about the vaccine technology or anything about it at all. So all they were doing was
one size fits all. Like, how can one vaccine be good for everyone?
No, they were salesmen, just like Rabbi used to be a salesman. They were salesmen for the institution of modern medicine. They were just parroting a policy, and this is unfortunately, I want to add to what he said, is that most rabbanim nowadays are doing the same. I know many of these rabbis personally, some of these chief rabbis even personally, and you wouldn't believe what's happening now. Most rabbanim nowadays, they're just Googling. They're just Googling that you have now. You could get, it's called, what is it called?
Everything on Google is Torah from Sinai.
Yeah, you could go yourself. You could get, it's the software Barilan, or you could get the Otzara Chochmah. You could at your fingertips all the tshuvot. So if you could look up a question and find 50 responsa from rabbis of previous generations on that particular topic, and then you could choose which one you want to follow. Yeah. This is what rabbanim nowadays are doing. It's like it's so no one really, there's no critical thinking. And again, I'm saying this with I want to say this with humility, and I'm not trying to discredit the rabbinate in anyone's eyes. I'm just saying that most rabbanim nowadays are not thinking critically. They're fishing for what other previous rabbanim said about whatever topic it was. And there were a lot of mistakes even in the past. And the biggest mistake of all is this mistake, which I'm calling collectivism. And with all due respect to all Orthodox Jews and all, there were the great Gedolei HaPoskim of the past made mistakes about vaccines. Going back to the Jenner vaccine, the smallpox vaccine. Again, it was based on misinformation. And not only based on misinformation, I'm talking about the Tiferet Yisrael and the greatest sages of previous generations made mistakes, and it was mistake. The mistake was not only the mistake about understanding the real risks of a vaccine and what the vaccine does, but more importantly than that, they made a mistake they had an ideological mistake of collectivism, that the individual should sacrifice himself for the klal. Many rabbanim made this mistake, and it's against the Torah values. It's against real authentic Torah values.
Right. So I think you're a great expert on that subject that I want to touch base on right now. Can
Sure.
you teach our audience once and for all, what are symbolism of idolatry? What do we have to look out for? What do we have to be careful when we see it? What should ring our alarm bells? What is a red flag? What and why do we see right now so many of these symbolisms in Jewish organizations? What's going on?
This is a very complicated question, but I'll just tell you in a nutshell. Uh, First of all, I mentioned Rabbi Feinstein himself, and Zichron Livracha, and he mentioned that people are blindly following doctors nowadays like avodah zarah, like idolatry. I mean, they've suspended critical reasoning, and they're blindly following. That's number one. But like Rabbi Mordechai mentioned, conformity to a group, which comes from avodah zarah, because a Jew is supposed to have a personal relationship with Hashem, and then the tzibur is made up of a bunch of individuals who join together to serve Hashem. But what you mentioned something which is a very unique situation, which most of the Jewish world is unfortunately not aware of. I'm assuming that you, Rabbi Mordechai, and you might be aware of this. We are experiencing in modern times a proliferation of a very insidious form of idolatry that no one has been aware of in past generations. And you could call this antinomianism. There is a cult. There is a cult that, again, the public is mostly unaware of, and its images are embossed on your dollar bill. They call it the cult of the all-seeing eye. This has been this is actually sadly a deviant cult that has its origins in Jewish people. Unfortunately, in the past couple hundred years, there were deviant false messianic movements. Shabbata'ut, Sabbateanism, and Frankism, that were complete departures of authentic Judaism, authentic Kabbalah, authentic Torah thought. It does have earlier origins than that. It goes back to the Roman Empire. It goes back to goes back to the Jesuits, and
Right.
It has even had certain iterations even in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. But this, what we call antinomianism, what you're seeing nowadays is, again, people might think I'm completely crazy by saying this. You mentioned the word conspiracy. I don't like to say conspiracy is a real word. The Torah mentions it many times. Kasher zamam, zamama, nazimat. The Torah mentions conspiracy.
Right.
Conspiracies exist.
Right.
The problem is when people call conspiracy theories.
Right.
But really, it's not a conspiracy theory; it's conspiracy reality. And the reason I call it a conspiracy reality is because if you look back at COVID, you'll see that all of the COVID policies, none of which are based on any empirical evidence or any objective reality, they were all dictated by unelected, powerful handlers of governments. And what you see, which is remarkable, was that Bibi and people of his ilk, of his
Right.
the Zionist state entity, and the United States, and the Muslim, and the Hamas, and the Ayatollah, all of them were wearing masks. China and North Korea, they all were wearing masks. They were all kowtowing to a policy that was dictated by someone and something that we don't know who it was, because it can't have been Fauci. Why would China listen to Fauci? It can't be the World Health Organization. Why would China listen? Because it was someone who's pulling the strings of all of these puppets. And if you only look objectively at what was happening, you realize that there is a conspiracy. So the pandemic, the public health, this is clearly a conspiracy. It's not it's a conspiracy fact. You could see it. We witnessed it. And the same thing with so you mentioned now the avodah zarah. The best thing I would recommend to your viewers is to start reading. I would recommend a book by an Orthodox rabbi named Rav Moshe Antelman. I can't say that I agree with every single thing he wrote in his book, but he will get you started. He'll explain to you the origins of antinomianism. Do you know what I mean by antinomianism, Jasmine? You know what that means?
Can you explain it a little bit for us?
Antinomian. The antinomianism is, you also look it up online, but antinomian is a belief system. Some people would call it amoral, where people who believe that there's no objective right and wrong, but to the contrary, it's a mitzvah to do the most evil behaviors. This is what people like Frank Yamach Shemo, we don't say lightly. We try to avoid saying Yamach Shemo, his name being erased by Jews, but Tzvi and Frank are exceptions. They're people that were so evil
By the way, I'm a direct descendant of Yaakov from Emden. So I am a direct granddaughter of Chacham Tzvi Ashkenazi.
Oh, wow.
So I feel this is why I am the way I am.
Yeah. Yeah, he was fighting the fight back then. But it's interesting because if you look at Chabad, the Yaakov Emden was in the times of the Baal Shem Tov. But if you look at all of the Admorim in the Chabad world, including the Baal Shem Tov himself, before Chabad, before the
I'm
other,
also related to him. Yes, yeah.
They all were fighting antinomianism, or I want to use the word again. Some of your viewers will think I'm crazy, but you could look up the word Illuminati, New World Order, all of these words that these people, that all of the politicians are saying nowadays. New World Order. These are words that are several hundred years old, and these were words that were propounded by Sabbatean Frankists in collaboration with Vatican and other and the wealthiest families in the world, including the British royal family, other royal families, and industrialists and the super wealthy bankers. So they're talking about depopulation and enslaving the human population for centuries already. And if you look at the history of the Hasidic movement, you'll find that every single, for example, what we call the Admor Hazaken, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi, the author of the Shulchan Aruch Harav Netanya, he opposed with every fiber of his being Napoleon, and Napoleon was an Illuminati. He put his hand in it like this, and he made his Illuminati symbols, and he believed he was an antinomian. He believed in New World Order. The New World Order goes back to the Plato's Republic, and their symbol, the favorite symbol of these pagans, is the triangle, the pyramid, which represents their triangular ideal society where there's a ruling class of the wealthiest people who control all the world's assets, and then there's the soldiers and the workers.
Right.
This pyramid, you'll find it everywhere. They call it, again, I meant to mention the cult of the all-seeing eye. It's on the dollar bill. What's happening nowadays is that these antinomian symbols, including hand gestures, are ubiquitous now throughout the world, and unfortunately you'll find them in the Jewish world as well. And I only started to notice this recently. I find, for example, on aish.com, chabad.org, you'll find there are people covering their eyes. You'll notice this, that nearly all celebrities are doing this.
So who in these organizations, I call them organizations, but we shouldn't call them organizations, religious entities, like how does that come in? I mean, how is Chabad and Aish infiltrated with
Yes, they're infiltrated. Yes, the vast majority of people who are working are good people. They don't know, but the people at the very top, someone is paying a lot of money to put in antinomian symbiology to put the one eye.
So you're saying this is coming down from a top rabbi, not from some marketing department. It comes from a top rabbi.
Yes. No, it's coming from someone close to or at the very top, who's being given a lot of money or being required to do. I'll give you an example. This is an example that would shock you. Again, I know, so it should shock your viewers. And by the way, the face mask that they were making people wear during COVID, this is a satanic pagan part of pagan worship, and it was definitely by design. It was avodah zarah. The face mask was an act of avodah zarah. Most people didn't know that; they were just putting it on. They thought they had to. But I heard that
from sheep to put a diaper on your face. I don't hear. I don't see. I don't speak.
It's not only a symbol of slavery and sheep. It's a symbol of pagan worship, because at every satanic or what they call neo-pagan worship, the rituals, worshippers have to don a mask on their face. And this was true in ancient pagan times, ancient American Indians and others. But this is not, and I've heard this from eyewitnesses. I've heard this from people who've watched, who've been at modern day pagan worship. And this really exists. Most people think, it doesn't. It exists, and it's a real thing. But you mentioned, what did you mention? You asked about who's doing this. I don't believe that the aish.com or the Chabad.org people are evil or bad, but they're following orders because someone, I know what I was going to tell you. I want to tell you a story. Again, something I know firsthand. When the COVID vaccine was rolled out, So there was a tremendous push to incentivize it, to give the governor of New York was giving people first a free hamburger and free French fries, and then they upped it to $100. They were giving all kinds of freebies if you take the COVID vaccine. But where did all this money come from, right? There's some corporations, private interest groups, with someone who had lots and lots of money putting. Now that in certain states were giving $100 per person or other free stuff per person to take the COVID vaccine. But what you may not know is that in the Jewish world, in the Orthodox Jewish world, there were certain communities where they were giving $1,000 per person. One of those places was in Crown Heights, in the heart of the Chabad, Hasidut Chabad, right? In Crown Heights. And there were certain schools. There was one school. I don't remember if it was called, it was a girls' school. I don't remember if it was Benot Menachem or Bet Chai Mushka or one of those. I forgot which one.
Right.
I could give you the name if you ask me later offline. They were giving an anonymous donor was giving $1,000 for each of these teenage girls who would go and take the COVID vaccine.
Horrible. What an
$1,000. And do you know what happened? So I was baffled, and I didn't see this in other schools. We only saw this in this one particular school. Maybe it started at a different school after that, but I heard later on. So then when I started speaking against antinomian, or I want to call it secret societies in general. And by the way, do you know who was a member or was very active in a secret society? Another person who was? Rav Kook. Rav Kook was active in a secret society that was aligned with B'nai B'rith, that was aligned with the Freemasons.
How does a rabbi go from yeshiva to Freemasons? How is that?
And not only that, almost every Rav Harashi, almost every Rav Harashi of Israel, going back till Rav Kook, were Freemasons. You see, he says Rav, what's his name? Rav Meir Lau. He says it openly. He was Bonim Chofsheim. He's been for 50 years. The first Orthodox rabbi who got up in front of the British Parliament and said that every Jew has to vaccinate. There's no religious excuse in the Jewish religion not to vaccinate. He was a Freemason. He was the chief rabbi of Israel, of England, of the Commonwealth back in 18 something or other. And every British chief rabbi also has been a Freemason. Every celebrity, every person, every famous celebrity,
mind-blowing.
In Hollywood. What's that?
Yeah, that's mind-blowing. People need to know that.
Yeah, but what I wanted to mention was
people don't understand what are Freemasons, Bonim Chofshim. Can you explain a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, no, let me just tell you the story very quickly. This is important for your viewers to understand. So I started speaking against secret societies. It's incomprehensible. It's unconscionable for any Jewish person who should profess loyalty only to God Almighty, only to the Torah Moshe, to profess loyalty to some secret society. What did these do loyalty? Why does a Jew be loyal to anyone else? So I started speaking against this, and I got my brother involved in this, and we started researching this. My brother told me one day, Jacques, he said he has a very good friend who's a friend of mine, who was a rabbi in a certain place in New York State. And one day, one of his rabbinical friends told him, not Chabad, he told him that he was promised a lot of money if he would go to a secret society called the Knights of Pythias. Now, the Knights of Pythias is one of these Knights of Pythias. Knights of Pythias. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Pythias. Okay. You can look it up. So he went to it. He was told that you could greatly augment or enhance your fundraising for your kehilot if you get yourself involved in a community like this. So he went to one session like this. He joined it. He said he went to one session. He said he got a few $1,000s for some fund he was raising money for at the time, $5,000 or $6,000. But they were doing strange rituals, which he didn't understand. And in the end, it wasn't worth it for him. For a few $1,000s, he's going to compromise himself and be involved with something strange he doesn't understand. He didn't have time for it. He stopped going to it. But he saw certain people there, and he gave my brother names of people that he saw there, including prominent members in the Chabad community. And one of the people that he saw there was the headmaster of that girls' school that was giving $1,000 per girl to get a COVID vaccine. So you see that something about these secret societies, which is, again, I believe this is pagan. There's more to speak about, but unfortunately, I have to leave in a few minutes now. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And if with your permission, I understand you have to leave right now because you're talking from a library that's about to close down. We want to do a part B sometime, sure. not when you're busy, when you have time. I want to talk to you about politics in Israel. I want to start talking about Bibi Netanyahu, and I want to start talking about Donald Trump. Can you give me like 2-3 sentences about what you think is going on in the Israeli government?
Yeah. In a nutshell, in one 10 seconds, I'll just say they're puppets. They're antinomian puppets. They're not working for the interest of the Jewish people. They've sold Israel to the highest bidder, which is the antinomian super wealthy class of predators. So nothing that they are doing or Trump should be relied upon at all. And to the contrary, we need to reject these tyrants. And that's the only way we're going to survive with Hashem's help.
Okay, thank you very much for your time and
thank you. Thank you,
joining us tonight. And we will do definitely a part B, and we have so much more to discuss and talk about. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.